Yes, in honor of my mom. Yeah, so she used to do it. Yes. So, should I come with my walker?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you please will come in and take your seats so we can get started.
Hi, sweetheart, how are you?
I hope you come in, take your seats. Those of you who have been enjoying the music, thank you for coming in early to set the atmosphere for our program today. I don't think it can go any louder. I think everybody else has to listen a little bit quieter. Thank you. I hope you all have enjoyed our musicians. I will be talking about them later on today. But at this time, I would like to introduce Gary Levin, who is the co-chair of today's event.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our annual Yom Hasho'ah commemoration. I'm Dr. Gary Levin, co-chair of our Holocaust Committee and a virtual docent at the Holocaust Museum, Los Angeles. Today, we gather in remembrance, in reflection, and in a shared commitment to ensure that the stories, the resilience, and the legacy of those who endured and those who were lost are never forgotten. Our Holocaust Committee has worked thoughtfully and diligently to create a meaningful program that honors our cherished Holocaust survivors and second-generation survivors. At this time, we kindly ask that you take a moment to silence all mobile devices and make notes of your nearest exits. It is now my pleasure to introduce Danny Laban, our Federation CEO, and Arnie Gilman is the president of the Federation to give opening remarks.
So I'm Arnie Gilman. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I wanted to thank Rabbi Novak and Nancy for allowing us to use this beautiful facility, so thank you so much. I would also like to thank the volunteers that made this thing happen, the staff of the Federation, and also Leslie Pepper. Thank you so much. And now I would like to introduce my friend, the CEO, the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation, and my good friend, Danny Laban. Thank you.
Committed community members and esteemed guests, shalom and good afternoon. The official date of Yom Hasho'ah, which is actually today, the 27th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, was chosen by Israel's Knesset to mark the date of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of 1943. But it also feels especially poignant that Yom Hasho'ah takes place just a couple days after we all finished celebrating the holiday of Passover. As we sat around our respective Seder tables last week, we were reminded that each one of us must see ourselves as if we, each ourselves, had been a slave in Egypt. So too does that sense of personal solidarity and immersion apply to the lessons of the Holocaust. It's why we come together as a community year after year on this solemn day to ensure that the flame of memory remains forever kindled. But today is not only for all of us here to remember. Today is also a way for us to create pathways for future generations to remember. Today, as anti-Semitism continues to metamorphosize into so many insidious forms, Holocaust denial is no longer relegated to some extreme fringe of society. That threat is quickly encroaching ever closer. Our federation here in the desert is leading a massive effort, not just by convening today's Yom HaShoah ceremony, but by working with partners to combat anti-Semitism every day. We're working across generations at schools in the desert to ensure that history is taught and that the lessons of the Holocaust are learned. We're helping to make history accessible and relevant with our annual Holocaust poetry and art competition for Coachella Valley middle school students, some of whom are here today and some of whose projects for the competition are on display in the lobby, and I would encourage everyone to be inspired by them on the way out. We're also supporting Jewish college students on local campuses right here in Riverside County, who each day are facing hatred in ways we once believed, or at least we all once wanted to believe, was part of a bygone past. But why are we invested in all of these activities and all of these efforts? We're doing all of this to ensure something fairly basic to each of us here, to ensure our sacred pledge of never again. Never again cannot just be a slogan or something that we casually say and take for granted. Contributing to never again and making sure that never again is a reality is something that each and every one of us must make an active decision to uphold. And by coming here today, each of us is taking some part in contributing to our community's sacred journey of ensuring never again. Thank you to each of you for being part of this collective effort, for being here today, for coming to this event, and for being part of our community throughout the year. Am Yisrael Chai. And I'd now like to introduce our friend, Rabbi David Novak, who, as Arnie pointed out, is our gracious host today. And thank you for having us.
In November, I spent 2 weeks in Berlin that allowed me to experience how the Germans are dealing with the memory of the annihilation of the European Jewish community 80 years after the end of the Second World War. One does not have to look far to see the history of the 20th century on the city's landscape, from its founding to becoming the capital of Prussia in the 19th century, to Weimar immediately preceding the Nazis, to the division of the city post-war. It is a cityscape that tells chaotic stories. Berlin's memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe is a vast setting of 2,710 stelae over 19,000 square meters of gray concrete and varying heights by architect Peter Eisman. The stele, as one enters, creates a sense of loss and dislocation as you go up and down, rising and falling on the ground. And there I prayed an El Malei Rachamim for the 6 million Jews and the 5 million other victims of the Nazis. And beneath the memorial is a museum which documents the fates of several families, which I also went through. And across from this memorial, the stele, is a memorial to the homosexuals persecuted under Nazism. Another day, I visited the Topography of Terror, an in- and outdoor display where the Gestapo, SS, and Reich security main offices were. There are accounts which buildings were there, some that are still extant, and the activities that took place. Another powerful example of preserving horrific memory. And Berlin is 25 minutes away from a concentration camp, Sachsenhausen, opened in 1936. It was built mainly with prison labor. More than 200,000 people were imprisoned there. Tens of thousands died from starvation and disease, forced labor and maltreatment, and were murdered systematically by the SS. Many of the buildings there were gone. However, the memorial and museum recognizes where they once were. Of course, entering this museum memorial, I walked under the words, Arbeit macht frei. Work will make you free. It was part of the Nazis' exquisite use of propaganda, given that no prisoners, no matter how hard they worked, would ever be free. And then there were the smaller signs around Berlin, such as outside my subway station, where there was a sign, a wooden sign, that had the names of all of the camps and said that on this site Jews were deported to any number of death camps. And there are also the Stolperstein, the embedded little golden bricks in pavements from where people last lived, indicating their fate. I was just able to view a documentary on Times of Israel where they put a Stolperstein for the director's father. Axel Springer built a building where his house was, and so they put that there in front of the new building. My entire life, my childhood rabbi and his wife were in Auschwitz from Hungary. I've known about the Holocaust all the days, and this is the first time I've come to Yom HaShoah, having walked under Arbeit macht frei. And so with my Jewish eyes, I was able to see Berlin, which is a fantastic 21st century city that is unable to forget the horrors of the 20th that began there. We remember.
I would now like to ask you all, if you can, to rise in the singing of our Star-Spangled Banner, followed by Hatikva. We have each of the flags up on the stage with our beautiful musicians accompanying us. Seated. Next, it is my great pleasure to introduce a member of not only our wonderful Holocaust Committee, but the education director here at Temple Sinai, Talia Lizzimer Howley, to talk about a very special contest that took place. It's all in your booklet. It's the Kindness Essay Award. Talia?
Thank you. So for the last 26 years, Palm Desert Charter Middle School has been engaging its students in Holocaust studies. And for the last 17 years, they have been listening to a Holocaust survivor. She visits their school 3 times in a year and talks to the students and shares with her students the story of her life. Now, last year, Palm Desert Middle School decided to join with Blue Card of New York and do a kindness project. So the students write an essay about kindness, which a lot of it is based on Goldie's story, and they get winners. Now, last year was the first year, so they had approximately 100 entries. This year, they had more than 200 entries. And I would like to welcome their teacher, Nan Davis. Where are you, Nan? Come here. She's been very engaged in Holocaust studies. And of course, I would like to welcome the wonderful speaker, Goldie Jacoby. Come on, Goldie.
I'm a wonderful speaker, but not speaking. I'm not speaking. I just want to say a few words, not speaking. Just a few words to thank you all for this honor. I so appreciate it, but this honor belongs to the wonderful students and the amazing teacher of the Palm Desert Middle School. It's the 8th grade. A special thanks to Nan Davis, a passionate teacher of the Holocaust. I thank you because they don't let me read the rest.
Shalom, and thank you for allowing us to be here today. Of course, we want to a big thanks to Temple Sinai, a thank you to the Jewish Federation, and of course to Blue Card for making this possible. And it wouldn't be possible without Goldie coming every year and survivors before her. At this time, we would like to honor our winners of the Kindness Essay Contest. In 3rd place is Miss Sophia Foreman.
This is for you.
Congratulations. In 2nd place, Alia Limon. Both those students are from Miss Wagner's class. And our 1st place winner from my class, Miss Olivia Campbell. We are thrilled to have Olivia read her 1st place winning essay about kindness to each of you. Please welcome Olivia.
The Anatomy of a Miracle. Blisters covering your aching bare feet, lice crawling through your hair, death lurking all around. It is 1942 in Frischak, Poland, and you are Jewish. You are fleeing the Nazis, and somehow you make it out alive. Somehow you survive and escape to America, and it is a miracle. Except it's not. The reason you and your family are alive is kindness, and without it, there would be no story to tell. This was the reality for Holocaust survivor Goldie Jacoby, who still believes in kindness today because of these experiences. Kindness can create a ripple effect when one decision or action changes lives and spreads hope during difficult times. which can be shown multiple times throughout literature, science, and especially in Goldie's story. Goldie Jacoby is one of the few people still here today who had to live through the horrible and gruesome events of World War II, where kindness was a foreign concept to many victims. When the war reached its peak in 1942, Goldie and her family were trying to escape the horrors taking place in Frischtak, Poland. An article on Goldie Jacoby by the Blue Card describes what she saw as where Jews were ordered to assemble. Goldie witnessed Gestapo wrenching babies from their mother's arms and hurling them at a cement wall. And she saw Nazis murder her grandparents with rifle butts. This just goes to show the reality of what happens when we are manipulated into dehumanizing a group of people based on what they believe in. After Goldie finally slipped away with her family and ran, they encountered a Nazi soldier and all hope was lost. Right when they thought they were about to die, the soldier chose to give them mercy. In other words, the soldier chose kindness and spared the lives of 10 people. Ever so gratefully, they kept going and begged people at their doors for food and shelter, up until another man chose kindness and took them in. He continued to hide them in his barn for the next 3 years until the war was over. If the soldier or the man hadn't chosen kindness, Goldie and her family might have been lost forever. This story is a perfect example of the ripple effect, because not only did the kind actions and split-second decisions temporarily save 10 lives, but it made a positive, long-lasting impact on hundreds, if not thousands of others through the survival and storytelling of Goldie. This proves that even small, individual actions can impact generations, and this knowledge could inspire people to choose kindness more often. On top of that, an article on adolescent psychology by Dr. Emily Carter states that when a person experiences or witnesses kindness, the brain releases chemicals such as dopamine and oxytocin. These chemicals increase feelings of happiness and connection. This means that just hearing about Goldie's story can spread hope and create a better environment overall. Small acts of kindness, like in Goldie's story, can keep rippling outwards far beyond the original impact and can make all the difference in the future. This ripple effect can also be found in literature as well. The lesson this story teaches is about how much our decisions matter and why it is important to make thoughtful ones even in times of crisis, no matter the consequences. If we put ourselves first in every harmful situation, people can be hurt, killed, and nobody would be able to survive on their own. In a timeless piece of literature, The Book Thief, something akin to a miracle took place during a march of Jewish prisoners down a German street. Here is an excerpt from the story. Just give him 5 more minutes and he would surely fall into a German gutter and die. Then, one human. He made his way through the people onto the road. The Jew stood before him, expecting another handful of derision, but he watched with everyone else as Hans Huberman held his hand out and presented a piece of bread like magic. When it changed hands, the Jew slid down. He fell to his knees and held Papa's shins. He buried his face between them and thanked him. Hans Huberman, or Papa, did not act for recognition. In fact, the consequences of his actions were detrimental, but he did it anyway. He was motivated by a strong sense of responsibility to care for a dying, helpless human, and it showed that even in times of danger, individuals can still choose kindness. In the end, you can find kindness in history, science, literature, and there's something that all acts of kindness have in common. They spread love, hope, and can shine a bright light during the darkest moments. As shown in Goldie's story and in The Book Thief, people chose kindness no matter how much it cost or how risky it was, and it saved lives. Our generation has a responsibility to follow through with the kindness shown selflessly in the past and preserve what past generations did for us. Choosing and spreading this kindness is how lives are saved and is what miracles are made of. The next time you make an important decision or someone asks you for help, know how much of a difference it will make to be kind. Thank you.
Housekeeping, did someone lose a pair of glasses? And now we are going to go into our candle lighting portion of the program. But I have to say, hearing from an 8th grade student like we just did gives me such hope for the future. I cannot tell you how much that touches everybody that's here. Lighting candle number 1 in honor and remembrance of the 6 million Jews who perished in the Shoah is Goldie Jacoby. Candle number 2 will be lit by Susanna Juhas in honor and remembrance of the freedom fighters who fought valiantly. Lighting candle number 3 will be Ruth Lindemann in honor and remembrance of the righteous Gentiles. And for those of you wondering why we're passing out yellow flowers, you'll see a little description in the booklet about what the yellow flowers stand for. Candle number 4 will be lit by Ricky Terrace in honor and remembrance of those who survived the camps. Doesn't matter. And lighting candle number 5 today will be Karen Chester, the daughter of a survivor who spent many Yom HaShoahs with us, in honor and remembrance of the 5 million non-Jews who perished in the Shoah, including men of the Pink Triangle, disabled people, Roma, and Jehovah's Witnesses. Lighting candle number 6 today is Sandy Danziger, who is a member of our Holocaust Committee and the daughter of survivors. She is lighting this candle to honor the next generations and endow them with the responsibility of remembrance. And candle number 7, which has already been lit, is in honor and remembrance of all the victims of October 7th, 2023, and of the current situation going on in Israel. And it's symbolically placed on 7 prayer books to always recall the connection to why they were murdered, because they were Jews. At this time, I'd like to invite Rabbi J.B. Singer from our committee. I'm sorry, J.B. Sachs. I am so sorry, I'm getting names confused today, and I know him quite well. Rabbi, would you come up, please?
I'm not here merely or primarily as a rabbi, but as a member of a family that lost over 300 members during the Shoah, and as a member of a people whose soul was wounded during that time. The survivor community has suffered more losses this year. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, Aaron Bell, aged 98, passed away. He was the last living member of the 4 brothers who founded and led the Bielski brother partisans, who rescued more than 1,200 Jews in Belarus during the Shoah. Aaron's role as scout and courier was crucial. Most of the very few members of my family who survived as part of partisan groups. On Erev Sukkot, Paula Lebovich died. After a year and a half in the Ostrovich forced labor camp, she and her family were squeezed into cattle cars on August 1st, 1944, and sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Only 10 years old, in order to breathe, she sat on her brother's shoulders so she could get a few whiffs of fresh air above the adult's head in the packed car. She spent 6 years after the war at displaced persons camp in Germany. She became a Holocaust educator and speaker. On January 3rd, Eva Geringer-Sloss died, aged 96. Like her stepsister Anne Frank, Eva and her family were hiding in Amsterdam, but were betrayed by a double agent in the Dutch underground and arrested in May 1944. They were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where the rest of her family were murdered. She wrote 3 books and dedicated her life to Holocaust education and to fighting prejudice. Also on January 3rd, Joseph Joe Weselsky, aged 107, not then the oldest survivor, nor today, but Ireland's oldest living person, was a survivor from Trnava in Czechoslovakia, who became twice a table tennis champion and captain of the Irish national team. On April 4th, Sam Harris, aged 90, died. He was the driving force behind the creation and founding of the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie. So new, the blood cries from Auschwitz-Birkenau, Babi Yar, Buchenwald, Belzec, Bergen-Belsen, Bialystok, Chelmno, Czernowitz, Dachau, Dora Mittelbau, Drancy, Flossenburg, Gross-Rosen, Janowska, Kilsa, Kovna, Lvov, Mauthausen, Majdanek, Neuengamme, Novogrodok, Otmut, Plazhau, Ponari, Radom, Ravensbrück, Riga, Salonika, Sobibor, Sachsenhausen, Stutthof, Treblinka, Theresienstadt, Warsaw, Westerbork, Zhytomyr, and so many hundreds and hundreds of other ghettos, forests, labor camps, death camps. What can we say? What can we do? They have left their lives to us. So let 6 million prayers rise whenever Jews gather. Let 6 million candles glow against the darkness of their unfinished lives. Let 6 million mitzvot, followed by 6 million acts of kindness, followed by 6 million acts of generosity, and 6 million acts of sweetness, and then 6 million acts of compassion flow from all of us until we have rid this world of all hate, cruelty, cynicism, vitriol, and meanness, and rendering our world once again worthy of a God of love, a God of caring, a God of peace. Amen. I first ask the survivors and their families to rise for Mourners Kaddish. We acknowledge you and love you and support you and are with you. I now invite anyone else whose family lost members or were close friends of Holocaust survivors, anyone else with such a personal connection, to please rise. And I now invite all of us who commit to those already standing, not only that we will not forget, but we will be active in doing all that we can to make the world a better place, worthy of the memories of those who passed away, and worthy of being in the presence of our beloved survivors. Mourner's Kaddish, I believe it's on page, it's in the middle of the booklet. Together. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah be'alma divara kirute v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agalau v'zaman kari v'yamaru amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevarach li'olam olalamei alamaya Yet barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekucha b'rihu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechamata da'amiran b'alma v'yimaru amen Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Sachs, so much. I would now like to introduce another very important part of our committee for the last 8, 10, 12 years, something like that, Stephanie Ross, who will introduce our next speaker.
The Jewish Federation of the Desert is proud to support Meir Panim, an Israeli nonprofit organization dedicated to combating poverty through vital social services and food assistance programs. Meir Panim provides essential support to thousands of Holocaust survivors in Israel, focusing on reducing poverty, isolation, and hunger. Their work helps ensure that these survivors, many of whom live below the poverty line, are not forgotten, and that they receive the care and dignity they so deeply deserve. At a time when their needs are so great, Meir Panim stands as a lifeline, offering nourishment, community, and compassion. It is now my pleasure to welcome Ali Delembo, Director of Development and Marketing for American Friends of Meir Panim.
Thank you so much. Hi. My name is Ali. As I've already been introduced, I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Development and Marketing at Meir Panim. At Meir Panim, our work is rooted in a simple but powerful belief that every person deserves dignity, especially in moments of hardship. Every day across Israel, we provide meals, support, and a sense of humanity to those who need it most, including Holocaust survivors who are still living through profound uncertainty today. It is from that place, from both proximity and responsibility, that I share these words with you today.
There's something distinct about the way that we as a people remember. We don't let memory sit quietly in the past. We weave it into who we are, into how we live, into what we owe one another. On Yom HaShoah, remembrance is not just an act of looking back, but it is an act of carrying forward. We speak about 6 million lives lost, but Jewish memory has never been only about numbers. It is about the insistence that every life mattered, that every story still echoes, that even absence can place a responsibility on the living. Maybe that's what makes today feel so heavy, because memory, when it's real, it's not distant. It doesn't stay in history books or ceremonies, but it presses on the present and it asks something of us here and now. Today, that feeling is especially close. Holocaust survivors, those who once endured the unimaginable, are again living in a world marked by uncertainty and war in Israel. It's not the same horror and it is not the same darkness, but there is still sirens, fear, and a bunch of disruption to daily life. For many, it is a painful echo. It is a reminder that safety is not something that has ever been able to be taken for granted. And in that realization, there's something that shifts. Because remembrance stops being only about honoring the past and becomes about recognizing what is still unfinished in the present. It becomes about seeing the people in front of us not as symbols of history, but as human beings that are still living through it. And that is where responsibility begins. At Mir Panim, our work exists in that space. It's between memory and responsibility. Not because food alone can answer history, it can't, but because dignity is one of the clearest ways that we are responsible for it. A warm meal, a place to sit, a moment of being seen not as a survivor and not as a statistic, but as just a person. That is how we translate memory into something more tangible, something human, and something that meets us in this moment. There's something almost paradoxical about this day. We gather to remember unimaginable loss, and yet what it calls forth from us is not grief, but obligation. Maybe even something more unexpected than that. It's a kind of quiet awareness and how fortunate we are to feel this weight at all. Because to carry memory like this, to feel it, to be unsettled by it, and to be changed by it, means that something endured. Not just survival, but meaning, and not just history, but responsibility. And for those who are here today, especially those who are newer to this work and this mission, the responsibility can sometimes feel quite abstract. It doesn't have to be, though, because the truth is, responsibility rarely begins with something grand. It begins with something small and something really human. It begins with showing up, with care, with choosing to care, with deciding that someone's vulnerability matters to you. This is how memory moves. It's not in sweeping gestures, but in quiet, consistent acts of dignity. So perhaps the question that today leaves us with is not only what we remember, but what we allow that memory to ask of us. It's how we show up, it's how we care for one another, it's how we respond to need in our own time. Because memory in our tradition is never meant to stay still, it is meant to move through us until it becomes action. So maybe the real question Yom HaShoah leaves us with today is, now that we remember, what kind of person will we choose to be? Thank you.
I'd now like to reintroduce Gary Levin, the co-chair of our program today, to introduce our keynote speaker.
When it was time for June to start on a new life journey, she wanted to do good for others. So she and her sister decided to combine June's two passions, writing and cooking, to create the tagline, Cookbooks with a Charitable Flavor. Inspired by Holocaust survivors, her book brings together recipes and powerful personal stories, including those of partisans, hidden children, and concentration camp survivor. Each story is profound and life-changing. All proceeds benefit nonprofit Jewish organizations. Through a focus on food history, June explores how food connects Jewish experiences and memory, especially for survivors, for whom food linked life before the war to the new lives they built afterwards. And now it is with great pleasure that I introduce June Hirsch.
Just in case, I will use this microphone. Having said that, he also says I can talk endlessly, so it's 3:45. Those of you who are going to Coachella tonight, I'm sure you're rushing to get out of here, but I will try. I will say to you that I feel this is very daunting, and I am almost never at a loss for words or overwhelmed. But I've also never been a speaker where I have bookended my comments from a Holocaust survivor. Where did Goldie go? There you, oh, over there. But you're hiding that beautiful face now. But bookending a Holocaust survivor and an encouraging and inspiring 8th grader. And I've never been in that position before, because seeing the resilience from your generation and the optimism from this next generation is really awesome. And I'm sure we all felt it. When I first got the call by Leslie to come out here and speak in Palm Desert, I didn't think there were as many Jews in this area as there are in this room. And the only thing I can assume is you guys all got confused. You heard Jews, desert, you meant to go to Israel, and somehow you ended up in California. I'm not sure how this happened, but you're here, and I'm grateful, and I'm so happy to be speaking to you today. So I wrote a book, and I'm going to put this down while I open the water, because I know you can still hear me. And I'm going to give this to Leslie to open. And I wrote a book to benefit the Museum of Jewish Heritage. And I wrote it at a time in my life where I was at a crossroads, and where you had spoken earlier, Doctor, and you said that I was inspired by something my sister said, which was, we did well, now let's do good. And what happened was we sold our family business. I found myself wanting to do something that had meaning. I was not just going to play golf all day, because that would just be a tragedy for me and the golf ball. And so that wasn't happening. And I proposed to the Museum of Jewish Heritage. Have any of you ever been to the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York? You have, so you know it's really an awesome institution. And I had gone there. You know Patty Kenner? Oh my goodness, well, she is one of my champions. Okay, absolutely, thank you. And you know you're in a Jewish crowd when you are interrupted, and it's by a rabbi, no less, right? And it's all good, because that's who we are. So feel free to interject. Anytime I say something, I'm going to give you a lot of opportunity, but I invite it, I love it, I thrive on it. Nobody really wants to be in a crowd of people who just sit quietly and listen. That's not who we are. So I invite you to participate. Thank you, Rabbi. She is a force. She really is. So I went to the museum, and Patty was one of the people I spoke to, and I said, I want to write a cookbook. And I wanted to benefit this museum. I want to tell the stories of Holocaust survivors. And I want to recreate their recipes. And they looked at me thinking, what do these two disparate things have in common? But for those of you in the room who are survivors, and I'm assuming you are one, Ruth, you know that food was a connection. It was a way to bring you back to that happy, wonderful place, your childhood, maybe the last gathering you had as a family, all of you together. Maybe you came to America and you recreated those recipes and it was a connection to your past, to your childhood, and it was all good. And I explained that to the museum and they said, what do you need from me? And I said, I only need you to give me a couple of names. We'll play Jewish geography. Give me one really solid person and I will start with them and I am sure we will be able to build a book. And that first person that they gave me was Regina Feiner. Now, some of you in this room are from Eastern Europe, I'm presuming. I am going to speak with an Eastern European accent. It is the worst Eastern European accent you're ever going to hear. One of my grandchildren says I sound like the Swedish Muppet. Do you remember the chef? Okay, but I'm going to do it anyway because it honors Regina, a blessed memory. And I called Regina and I said, Regina, I would like to interview you for a book that I am going to write to benefit the Museum of Jewish Heritage. I'd love to get your story. I'd like to hear about your recipes. And Regina said to me in her perfect European accent, well, Mamala, I don't think I have a story to tell. And I said, oh, Regina, I know your story, and I know you have a story to tell, and I would love to hear it. I'm going to come to your home, we'll sit down, and we'll talk. And she says, well, Mamala, can I just ask you a question? And I said, sure. She says, I hear that you live on Park Avenue in New York. And I said, I do. She says, well, then I'm coming to you. Now, I think Regina was a tad disappointed. I do not live like the Real Housewives of New York, but she came to my home. We sat at the table. She told me her story. We got through it. It was the first time that I had ever spoken one-on-one with a Holocaust survivor. And here it was now my job to elicit her story and to get her details. And when we were done, I breathed a sigh of relief and I said, okay, woo, we got through that. Let's go on to the easy part. I'm going to ask you about a recipe. You need to tell me, what is your signature dish? And she looked at me like it was yesterday and she said, what's a signature dish? And I said, something you prepare all the time. And she says, oh, that's easy. Kluskis. Anybody in here make kluskis? So you know what kluskis are? Okay, I will certainly invite you to. I will certainly invite you to do that because I would love to hear it and we can compare it with the one in the book. Not the recipe you have. Okay, is it a secret or are you going to share it with me? Okay, fine. You're going to share it with the whole class? Okay, fine. Okay, good. All right, sounds perfect. So she said, kluskis. And I said to her, how do you make them? And she says, oh, sweetheart, they're so easy. You take a handful of potatoes and you mix it with some flour and you have kluskis. And I looked at her and I said, Regina, you might have kluskis. I don't think I'm going to have kluskis. I said, are there eggs in it? She says, well, of course there are eggs. What do you think is going to hold it together? It was at that moment I knew I was in terrible trouble. And her daughter Evelyn was there. She was on the executive board of the museum, and she said, don't worry, I speak Regina. And with that, she says, Mom, when you go to the store to buy the potatoes for the kluski, do you buy one potato, do you buy two potatoes? And she looked at me, hand to God, and she said, if you think I would pay those ganefs what they charge for one potato, you've got to be kidding. She says, I buy a bag of potatoes. And her daughter said, Mom, when you buy the bag of potatoes, are you able to carry the bag of potatoes? And she says, well, last time I checked, nobody was carrying potatoes for me. And Mom, when you finish making the kluskis, how many potatoes are left in the bag? You've known Regina for 5 minutes. I knew her maybe for 30, but I bet you know the answer to what she said. She said none. She says, I wouldn't waste a potato if my life depended on it, because when I was in the camp, my life depended on it. And with that, her daughter held up her hand and she said, 5 pounds of potatoes. Every single recipe unfolded in the exact same way. I was told to use a handful of this and a handful of that, so much so that when I sent in the manuscript to the editor and she saw the word shitterine, she said, I don't think we should have profanity in the book. And I tried to explain to her that that means a little of this and a little of that. I was told to add a glass of oil, which was, what kind of glass? A Yortzeit glass. Now, back in the day, they were tumblers. Now they're this big. That makes a huge difference in a recipe. I was told to add a half an eggshell of matzah meal. Jumbo egg, small egg, ostrich egg, chicken egg. They didn't know, just a half an eggshell. So every single day, I took a recipe that I was given by one of my survivors, and I would prepare it for our dinner. So much so that that blessed man who's back there, who schleps me to all book talks all over the country, said to me, for 1 year, we've eaten like 85-year-old Polish peasants. And the truth of the matter is, it's very good food. It was organic before anybody knew what organic food was. I will say, I'm half Sephardic and half Ashkenazi. Is anyone else in this room Sephardic? Oh, yeah? Oh, okay, that I think I could have guessed. Well, Sephardic food is very colorful. It's parsley, it's lemons. I gotta say, Ashkenazi food, a bit beige, and I'm not gonna say it's bland, but it's a bit beige. So it's cabbage and pot cheese and noodles and potatoes, but it's all good. It's nourishing, it's hearty, it's healthy. It's what fed our ancestors for generations. And I laugh because some of it has actually become quite trendy. When I was writing the book, one of my daughters took me to a restaurant in the West Village of New York, and on the menu, toasted buckwheat groats, stop me when you know it, mixed with farfalle pasta, caramelized onions, right, it's kasha varnishkas. Daniel Boulud serves a chilled beet soup. It's borscht. You could call it what you want. This is good food. So the book is filled with recipes, and perhaps my next one will be filled with yours. It will not be borscht, okay? But it could be a new version of Kluski's. Huh. Oh, well, now you'll have to tell all of us. You will tell us that. I promise you. I promise you. Because I want to know, and I'm sure today. Yeah, no, I'm leaving for New York tomorrow, so it's got to be today. Right. I mean, honestly, I have a tea time at around 5, and then I'm leaving for New York, so it has to be today. Okay. All's fair. All's good. So the food is broad, it's vast, it's different. It represents all the countries that we've lived in, all the countries that we've been thrown out of, and all of the recipes in the book, I swear to it, they're all the best version you will ever have of that dish, and I know that because every single woman who gave me a recipe told me it was the best version of that dish. And when her husband, who was sitting right next to her, I'm going to take like this couple here. You know how you're sitting next to each other? It's very nice, it's sweet, it's like from Harry Met Sally where they're on the little bench at the end. And we would be talking, and I was in one woman's beautiful home. Regina should have gone to that house. It was on Sutton Place, and it was beautiful. And we were sitting there chatting, and she's giving me a recipe, and she's saying to her husband, Julius, and that's the best you've ever had, and he's not saying anything. And then she keeps saying, well, but that's the best, and he's not saying anything. And then all of a sudden I see her arm, Eva's arm, is kind of going into the ribs of Julius. And finally he piped up and he went, oh, well, that's the best. It's the absolute best you're ever gonna have. When I was done speaking to her, he said, if you don't mind, could I walk you to the elevator? See, you're obviously a very smart crowd, because you know where I'm going with this. We get to the elevator, but he had to tell me 3 things. Not 1, 3 things. The first truly was a very dirty joke, which I wish I could remember. If I could, I probably couldn't repeat it here in a synagogue, but it was a dirty joke. The second thing he said to me was, don't make that recipe. And I looked at him and I said, Julius, you said it was the best version of that dish. He says, what did you want me to say? I would have had a broken rib, or I had to agree with her. I went with agreeing with her and warning you in advance. So I got another recipe from her, and it's a delicious recipe, and she's a wonderful cook. And I said to him, what's the third thing you have to tell me? As long as I live, I will never know why, and unfortunately, he is now a blessed memory. He said, I'm 6 years older than she thinks I am. And why he felt, I don't know, I think he was like coming clean and confessing, and it just like poured out of him. He had no one else to tell the joke to, and he'd been dying to tell somebody that what she made is awful, and now I found out that he was 6 years older than she was. And he said, please don't ever tell her. And I said, my God, it's absolutely not. And he's no longer on this planet, and she is, but it remains a secret in this room. One of the things that I made that I am sure, I will bet you know how to make. I think you probably do too, and I'm looking at you, Stephanie. Are you a survivor? Because I know you came up, but you're not. All right, but maybe you know how to make it anyway. Pacha. Okay, so pacha is like cilantro. I think either you love it or you hate it. I've yet to meet anyone who loves it, but other than my father, who was my taste tester for it. But I made pacha in our house one day, and I made it in the morning, and my husband came downstairs, and he said to me, we have to sell the house. And I'm a good cook. I really wasn't sure where he was going with that, and he said, it's awful. It smells awful. So I had the phone number of the celebrity chef who gave it to me. Maybe some of you know the name Arthur Schwartz. He called himself the food maven. He was are you New Yorkers? Right. So he was a food commentator on Jewish food. And I called him, it was a Sunday morning, and I said, Arthur, it smells like a dead animal died behind my stove. And without missing a beat, he says, oh, then it's done. And so I'm going to say that if you make the recipe for pacha, which again, my father ate and survived, he's almost 100 years old, and yes, and all there, but he has somebody. I don't know if there are any single octogenarians in the room, but he's with somebody, a redhead, 17 years his junior, but I won't go there. Anyway, so there are a lot of different recipes in the book, and I'm going to say to you, because the Federation is selling the book today at an amazing price. You can't buy it on Amazon for that price, and you certainly can't get it signed by the author from Amazon. And just so you know, nothing on my fingers or my toes has ever come from the book. We have sold about 25,000 copies of the book that you can buy today, and every penny of proceeds has gone to a Holocaust organization. So I'm encouraging you. Now, it's our mitzvah. I've got 612 to go, but it's the one mitzvah I can truly lay claim to. And so I hope that you will embrace the book. And for those of you who say, I don't cook anymore, my kitchen is a Pilates studio. My grandchildren are vegan and they only eat on odd days of the week. I've heard all the excuses for not buying a cookbook, and I'm going to tell you, I don't really care, because all of you read, and this is not a cookbook. This is a storybook that has recipes. It's not a cookbook that has stories. This book is about the people. It's about the legacy. It's about, somebody used the word obligation, that it is our obligation. I will add to that obligation a hashtag that I want to go viral on. Maybe when we're done with the talk, maybe we can all stand up, yell the hashtag, I'll put it on social media, and maybe seeing a room filled that has Holocaust survivors in it on Yom HaShoah, maybe we'll really make it happen. But that term is extra-Semitism. I believe that the only way we're going to fight anti-Semitism is by being extra-Semitic, a little bit more Jewy than we were the day before. And I think that we've seen it, and rabbis, I don't know if you've seen it in your congregations, but I think you've probably seen, since 10/7, there are many more of us wearing our chais and our shalom necklaces and our Mogen Davids. And we're being a little bit louder and prouder because there was a comment made that an anti-Semite is someone who hated me before I was born. Right. You're not going to change that person's heart and mind. You're just not. So the only way you can combat what they're saying and doing is not by being on the defense, but by being on the offense, being a little bit more proud and prideful of being Jewish. And this room especially, I know you all feel it, but I would imagine many of you in this room are grandparents. Maybe some of you are even fortunate enough to be great-grandparents. We need to instill this in our children, because they are the ones, like these amazing 8th graders, who are going to keep these stories and legacies alive. This is what we need to do. And one of the ways I like to do it, truthfully, is through this book, because it tells over 100 stories. It recreates over 100 of these timeless, cherished recipes. So if you have the wherewithal, pick up a copy or a dozen and bring them. Next time you go to somebody's home, don't bring them like, I don't know, a jelly mold. Nobody wants that. Bring them a copy of this book. It's an enduring gift. It's something that they will cherish for a long time. So that's my sales pitch. So now, what I will say is that the book is about the stories. And I have survivors here, and sometimes I find it hard to tell stories of Holocaust survivors when I'm in the midst of Holocaust survivors, because each one of your stories is singular, it's incredible, it's especially unique to your situation. I heard over 100 and no two were the same, and each one had a different nuance. So forgive me, because I'm going to apologize for sharing other people's stories. But when I learn your story and go to your story, then I can start telling those stories as well and add them to the stories that I already know and that I cherish. And so I look forward to learning your stories as well. For today, I'll share with you the story of Mary Mayer. Mary Mayer is another one of those women who greeted me with, "I don't have a story to tell." And of course, 3 hours later, I left her home with a tray of the most, I'm going to call them, the best Linzer tart cookies you're ever going to eat. No exaggeration. If you are a very good baker, they're very easy to make. If you're not a very good baker, make friends with a very good baker, and you'll find that they'll be very easy to make. But it's really just that there's so much butter in the dough that you got to work quickly. So it's like rugla. You know how the rugla, those little triangles start to stick to your counter and you can't get them up, and you're sorry you just didn't, right? You're nodding that you didn't just buy them at the bakery. You got to work quickly, but it's a delicious cookie, and every time I make it, I think about Mary, who came from a Hungarian family. Are any of you of Hungarian descent? So then you're good cooks. Yeah, all right. And you also, quite honestly, think you're a better cook than the cook sitting next to you. Is that accurate? Because that's kind of a Hungarian thing, you know. So you're Hungarian, and you're very proud of your cooking, correct? They're excellent cooks. They seem to know how to combine the Jewish elements with a lot of flavor. I find they're really excellent cooks. So Mary Mayer came from a very privileged home. She was in boarding school. She had a nanny. She had a chauffeur. She had a cook. She had it all going for her. And as many of you know, the war came very late to Hungary. And so now it's 1944. And I think her family felt it would be safe for her to come back home. And they brought her back. But it was premature. And her mother was actually hidden in a house of Raoul Wallenberg's. And Mary got papers given to her by her governess. And the papers were saying that she was her Christian child. Now that was tantamount to treason. She really could have been killed for having done that. But she took the risk. And Mary took those papers and she crossed the Danube. She went from the Buda side of Budapest to the Pest side. And there she found work as a farmhand. Now this was a girl who came from a privileged home. She certainly wasn't used to doing manual labor, but she was grateful to be alive. And she told me that one day she was up in the attic where she slept, and she saw a truck coming down the street. And she thought quickly, and she went downstairs and she greeted the driver. And she said, "Welcome to our village." She said it in German. And in Russian, he answered her, and he said, "I'm not German, I'm Russian. I'm here to liberate this village." And in Russian, this teenage girl answered him and said, "I'm a Jew, take me home." And with that, he hoisted her up on the truck, and he drove her to the edge of the Danube River. And when she got there, the bridge had been blown out. And I said to Mary, "Oh my God, what did you do?" And she says, "Oh, sweetheart, I waited for winter and I walked across the frozen Danube." I got annoyed when my Lyft driver was 2 minutes late for this talk. That's about my level of patience. Mary waited for winter to walk across the frozen Danube. That is such a dose of perspective that I truly feel no community better than Holocaust survivors can imbue us with that sense of what's really important in this life. And it's a lesson that I learned from Mary. I learned from Celia Kenner to be always positive and resilient. Celia was, I think she was 7 years old when she was pulled from a playground. She had been playing on this playground with her friends, or those kids who were her friends in another lifetime. But on this day, as a truck went around her town picking up Jewish children, they all pointed at her and they all said, "She's a Jew." And they picked her up and he put her on his truck, and she turned to this driver at 7 years old and she said, "Why are you doing this to me? What did I ever do to you?" And with that, he opened the door and he pushed her off the truck. She's very lucky, saved her life. She ended up in the ghetto along with her uncles and cousins. And her mother worked outside the ghetto. And her mother came to the wall of the ghetto one day and she said, "You need to hide. They're going to liquidate the ghetto." And they all scurried to find hiding places. And Celia could not find one with the rest of her family. Again, fortunate for her, because she told me that in the middle of the night she heard her aunt screaming from the street below, "Celia, stay where you are. survive, tell our story. And Celia survived. Her mother came to the ghetto after it had been liquidated, took her away into the forest where a righteous Gentile hid her. And she stayed there for well over a year until the family next door were hung for hiding a Jewish child. And the mother at this house said, I cannot risk my family's life any longer. I need you to go. There is a barn at the outskirts of our property. I will bring food for the animals every 3 days. I hope you survive. And Celia got to that barn. She's now about 8.5 years old. She climbed up the ladder to the rafters because she heard some noise, and she sees this woman all balled up in the corner, and she gently turned her over. It was her mother. She was very, very ill, and every 3 days, Celia climbed down from those rafters, took the food intended for the animals, fed herself and her mother, and the two of them walked out of that barn together at the end of the war. And Celia did what's the best thing you can possibly do. It's what I said to Goldie. She lived a good life. It was the best way to say you know what to you know who. And she had children and grandchildren, and she shept nachas. That is a lesson in resilience. But of all the meanings of this book, Beshert is to me the overriding theme. I am a huge believer in meant-to-bes. I believe I was meant to write this book. I believe that I was meant to talk to this group of wonderful people. I believe you are now meant to talk about it to others, because that's our responsibility. And the story that exemplifies Beshert more than anything else in the book is the story of Ada Ehrlich and Nadia Bergson, two women from the same town in Poland who found themselves in Auschwitz, two women who were part of the only uprising ever to take place in a concentration camp, two women who stood in the center of Auschwitz's square and saw their co-conspirator, Rosa, hung. I was on the March of the Living 2 years ago, and I stood in the place where Rosa was hung, and she did not give a single name of the other women. And these women every day went to work in a munitions factory, and they took a little bit of gunpowder and they put it in the hem of their garment. And every night as they walked back to their barracks, they deposited that gunpowder in a vessel with the hope that one day it would become an explosive device. And it did. And they passed that device on to the Sonderkommando, those incredibly unfortunate men who ran the gas chambers and the crematoriums. And they gave them this vessel, and they blew up a crematorium. It had never happened before. It never happened again. And these two women, they walked out of Auschwitz together, and they went their own ways. And one day in New York, on a busy Manhattan street, Ada Ehrlich and Nadia Bergson bumped into each other. And they rekindled their friendship. And as was the case with so many survivors, they made friends family because they had lost family. And this is now who they celebrated births and brises and simchas and wonderful life cycle events. And as would have it, one of them, Nadia, stayed in New York, and Ada and her family moved to California. And her granddaughter, Jolie, wanted to go to college back east. And Jolie went to Ithaca, and she met a young man there, and they began dating. And she brought him home for one of the holidays. And in conversation, they discovered that not only was she Ada's granddaughter, he was Nadia's grandson. Both women lived to know they were dating. One of them lived to see them married. Neither was on this planet when Jolie gave birth to twins. She named one for Ada and one for Nadia. That's Beshert. Beshert is meant to be but we have control over that. My rabbi quoted a famous sage that you should pray as if everything depends on God, but you should act as if everything depends on you. We're depending on you to teach this next generation how to honor and preserve the legacy of Holocaust survivors. It is never more important than it is today, and I thank you so much for listening.
That's mine. I was going to say, you take yours, I'll keep mine.
All right, so, thank you. So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to all say, hang on, I'm not good at this. I need a teenager, but we're going to give it a try. Okay. And we're all going to say together. Wait, oh, I have to make a video, otherwise you won't hear it. Here I am at Temple Sinai in Palm Desert, and we are all going to make the hashtag extra-Semitism go viral. 1, 2, 3.
Anti-Semitism, go viral.
It's the only way to combat anti-Semitism.
Thank you. If you want to hear something.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, June, thank you. This is my second time hearing you, and wow. June will be available after this program outside with her books, and I just can't say enough. That was so thrilling. Now, I would like to take a few minutes as people are leaving to thank a number of people for today. Thank you, Rabbi and the staff at Temple Sinai for allowing us to use this beautiful facility. I'd like to thank the Holocaust Committee, who has worked together with me for 8 years now. Thank you so much. I would be remiss if I did not thank these wonderful musicians whose names are on the back of the program, who have been with us for many, many years and hopefully many more years to come. And last, I don't know if many of them are here, they're probably outside in the lobby, our dedicated small staff who makes these programs come alive. So thank you. And before you leave,
Wait. Give it up for Leslie Pepper, who worked all last week to bring us together. Give it up. One of the hardest working people there.
but before everybody leaves, if you could stand up and join arms, we're going to exit by singing O Says Shalom. Let there be peace in our world. Of the week.
Idea.